For 12 years, Rachel Cunningham touched her ears. Not once, not twice, but every single day, an unconscious habit the specialists dismissed, a silent plea no one seemed willing to understand. Damian Cunningham, her father, had spent more money than he'd ever admit chasing answers. Paris, Seoul, Dubai, private islands disguised as medical retreats, everywhere he landed, the verdict stayed the same, permanent. Untreatable. It didn't matter that he was a billionaire. It didn't matter that he built empires. His daughter still lived in a world without sound. Rachel was all he had left. His wife, Eleanor, didn't survive the night Rachel was born. One moment, Damian held her hand. The next, she slipped away without hearing the child she died delivering. The guilt rooted itself so deeply in him it became bone. So he pushed harder, spent faster, refused to accept reality. Because accepting it meant admitting he'd failed them both. But the answer wasn't waiting behind a surgical door or inside a research lab. It wasn't hidden in charts or scans or coded medical jargon. It walked into his home wearing a second-hand uniform and carrying the weight of overdue bills. Matilda, quiet, overlooked, invisible to everyone except the little girl who reached for her. She saw what the experts didn't. A flicker of pain in Rachel's eyes. A wince. A shadow deep within her ear that no one else bothered to question. And one afternoon, while Damian was away sealing another business deal, Matilda made a choice that could ruin her life, or save Rachel's. What she discovered inside that child's ear would unravel the lies Damian had been sold for years. Before we proceed, please take a moment to like, subscribe and comment where you're watching from to support this channel growth. It's just a push of a button to you, but it means the world to me. Thank you. Now let's get into it. The Cunningham estate rose from the hillside like a monument carved out of grief, vast, pristine, and so quiet it felt as though the air itself held its breath. Even the marble floors seemed to swallow sound, offering Damian the illusion of control he clung to day after day. Servants moved like shadows through the corridors, whispering only when absolutely necessary. Damian demanded silence, not out of cruelty, but because noise reminded him of everything he'd lost, everything he could not fix. In the center of that hushed world lived Rachel. 12 years old, small for her age, with soft blonde curls that framed her pale face, she drifted through the mansion like a ghost who refused to disappear. Her world was built from vibrations, colors, shifting expressions, and the gentle pressure of hands against her skin. She touched everything, door frames, tabletops, fabric textures, as though memorizing their presence. But most often, she touched her ears. Her fingertips brushed the curve of her left ear with a repetitive, almost rhythmic motion. Specialists dismissed it as a self-soothing habit of a deaf child. Damian accepted their words because he trusted them, trusted their degrees, their prestige, their confidence. He trusted everyone except himself. Every night, after the staff retreated to their quarters and Rachel was tucked into bed, Damian walked down the longest hallway in the mansion. At the end waited a single large portrait, Eleanor Cunningham, his wife, Rachel's mother. She was painted in a soft blue dress, her smile peaceful and warm, her hands resting over the swell of her pregnant belly. Damian would stand in front of that portrait for minutes, sometimes hours, imagining how her laugh would have filled these empty rooms, imagining her chasing Rachel down the stairs, guiding her hands through sign language, pressing a kiss to the top of her little head. But imagining also meant remembering, and remembering meant pain. The night Rachel was born replayed in his mind like a film stuck on an unending loop. Eleanor's hand slipping from his. Doctors shouting orders he couldn't understand. A newborn silence. No cry, no scream, only stillness. Damian had promised Eleanor he would protect their child. Yet he lost her within minutes, and Rachel entered a world without sound. In his heart, those two tragedies tangled so tightly he could no longer separate them. So he built walls, around his estate, around his emotions, around the truth he refused to face. And then one morning, Matilda arrived. She didn't belong in this world of quiet marble and polished silver. Her uniform was ironed but old, her shoes scuffed at the heels. She carried herself with humility, head slightly bowed, eyes careful yet warm. A woman used to being overlooked, ignored, underestimated. Damian barely looked at her as the head butler introduced them. Another maid. Another pair of hands to maintain the silence. But Rachel noticed her. The moment Matilda stepped into the foyer, Rachel paused mid-step. Her blue eyes widened with curious recognition, as if something about the woman felt familiar or safe. When Matilda offered a tentative smile, Rachel crossed the room in 3 swift steps and wrapped her small arms around the maid's waist. The servants froze. No one touched Rachel without permission. But Matilda instinctively rested a hand on the girl's back, steady, gentle, unafraid. Damian, watching from the staircase, felt something shift in the air. Something he didn't understand and didn't trust. Days passed, and Rachel shadowed Matilda everywhere, folding laundry beside her, tapping her shoulder to get her attention, placing objects in her hands just to see her reaction. And Matilda, though busy and careful with her duties, always acknowledged her. Always gave her a smile, a nod, a comforting touch. Then, one afternoon, as Matilda knelt to dust the lower shelves of the library, Rachel approached her with a familiar tapping motion against her left ear. But this time she winced, her face tightening, her eyes flinching with a flash of pain so sharp Matilda felt it in her own chest. Matilda looked closer. And for the very first time, she sensed something was deeply wrong. If you were standing in that silent mansion watching Rachel cling to Matilda, what would you say to her in that moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. Matilda couldn't shake the moment she saw Rachel flinch, so small, so subtle, yet heavy with meaning. As she knelt on the library floor, dust cloth still in hand, Rachel's fingers pressed again to her left ear, but this time her touch was hesitant, almost fearful. Matilda's brow furrowed, but before she could look closer, Rachel gently grabbed her wrist, guiding her attention to a nearby puzzle they had been working on earlier. It was as if the child wanted to distract her. But Matilda saw too much to ignore. Over the following days, Rachel became glued to her, moving through the mansion as her silent shadow. When Matilda polished the silver in the dining hall, Rachel mimicked her movements with a smaller cloth. When she scrubbed the kitchen counters, Rachel traced circles beside her, her lips curved in a soundless giggle. The staff whispered about the bond forming, unsure if Damian would approve, but they said nothing. They rarely said anything at all. Matilda didn't mind. She had learned long ago that genuine connection didn't always need words. She communicated with Rachel in the language of expression, arched brows, soft smiles, small nods, gentle touches to her shoulder or arm. Rachel responded with an eagerness Matilda had never seen in her before. The girl's blue eyes sparkled with life, and though she never laughed audibly, her entire body moved with joy when Matilda was near. One morning, as Matilda tied fresh linens on the guest beds, Rachel climbed onto the mattress, bouncing lightly. Matilda raised a playful eyebrow, pretending to scold her, and Rachel clapped her hands silently, mimicking her stern face back at her. Then she touched her ear again. Press, pull, slight twist, right before her face pinched with discomfort. Matilda froze. She moved slowly, gently lifting Rachel's chin so the light from the nearby window illuminated her face. As Rachel tilted her head, Matilda saw something, barely noticeable, deep inside the ear canal. A shadow. Dark. Dense. Her heart pounded. She leaned in closer, but Rachel jerked back, shaking her head vigorously. She didn't want Matilda to look. She didn't want anyone to look. Why? Matilda bit her lip as questions raced through her mind, all of them slamming against the same wall. The specialists had said nothing was physically wrong. They were the best in the world. They were paid fortunes for answers. Who was she, just a maid, to question them? But her instincts had never betrayed her before. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mansion, Damian sat stiffly in a sleek conference room, a panel of specialists beaming at him with rehearsed confidence. Screens displayed scans, graphs, and complex data points. The lead doctor, an elegant woman with silver-rimmed glasses, tapped her laser pointer against one of the images. As we've said before, Mr. Cunningham, your daughter's condition remains congenital. Irreversible. Her tone was smooth, polished. But our newest experimental therapy program has shown promise in controlled settings. Damian leaned forward. Controlled settings meaning? Early stage. Preliminary results. High cost. She smiled thinly. $4 million for the first phase. $4 million. Damian exhaled slowly. Money wasn't the issue. The problem was hope. Hope always came with a price, and he was running out of pieces of himself to pay with. He nodded stiffly, pretending to consider it, though he already knew he would sign the papers. What choice did he have? On his way home, he saw Rachel through the car window, running across the courtyard toward Matilda with a grin so wide it nearly broke him. He watched as she hugged Matilda's legs, as though the woman were the only safe place in the world. Damian dismissed it as a phase. A temporary fascination. Children got attached to caretakers all the time, and yet, he felt a tightness in his chest he couldn't explain. Back upstairs, Matilda sat with Rachel in the playroom. She watched closely as the girl tapped her ear again, wincing. The shadow she saw earlier haunted her thoughts. Something in her gut insisted this wasn't normal. That Rachel wasn't simply soothing herself. That something was wrong. So Matilda made a choice. The next time Rachel reached for her in pain, the next time she touched her ear with that quiet desperation, Matilda would look again, closer, deeper, without hesitation. Even if every expert in the world had missed it. What would you do if you saw something every expert missed? Would you speak up or stay silent? Comment your thoughts below. The moment Matilda had been waiting for, dreading, really, came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the tall arched windows of the east corridor, casting soft golden patches across the polished floor. Matilda was dusting the antique vases when she felt a sudden tug on her apron. Rachel! Her face was scrunched, lips quivering, eyes watery with panic. She pressed both hands against her left ear and shook her head violently as if trying to shake something loose. Then she lunged forward, burying herself in Matilda's waist with an intensity that startled her. Matilda dropped the cloth immediately and knelt beside her. "Sweet girl, what is it?" she whispered, knowing Rachel couldn't hear her, but still whispering, because it somehow felt right. Rachel's tiny fingers clutched her blouse in a silent plea. She trembled, tears sliding down her cheeks, every breath a shudder. Slowly, Matilda cupped her face, tilting it upward. She gently turned Rachel's head sideways, just like before, but this time Rachel didn't resist. She was in too much pain. The afternoon light hit her ear perfectly, and Matilda saw it again. That dark shadow deep inside, but clearer, larger, wrong. Her heartbeat quickened as she grabbed the small utility flashlight she kept clipped to her apron for dim storage rooms. She flicked it on and aimed the beam into Rachel's ear. Her breath caught. It wasn't a shadow. It was a mass. Thick, hardened, almost wax-like, wedged deep within the canal. Something no specialist had ever mentioned. Something that looked old. "Dear Lord," she whispered, crossing herself. Rachel whimpered, gripping her arm so tightly Matilda could feel her nails through the fabric. The girl's body shook as though begging for someone, anyone, to make the pain stop. Matilda froze. She wasn't a doctor. She wasn't trained. She was a maid in a billionaire's home. One wrong move could cost her more than her job. Damian Cunningham tolerated no mistakes, no risks. If he found out she tampered with his daughter. But then Rachel looked up at her. Tears streaked her pale cheeks, and her hands moved frantically, touching her ear, then Matilda's chest, then her ear again. A desperate, silent plea. "Please." Matilda's breath trembled. Every instinct screamed that she shouldn't interfere, but her heart refused to obey. If this were her own child, or her little cousin's back home, she would act without hesitation. Matilda steadied herself. "Okay, baby, okay. I've got you," she murmured, though the girl couldn't hear it. She angled Rachel's head gently into her lap, her fingers trembling as she reached inside the ear with slow, cautious pressure. The obstruction was wedged deep, fused to the canal, but she felt a small edge, just loose enough to grip. She whispered a prayer. "God, guide my hands." With a soft, careful motion, she began to pull. Rachel whimpered, but didn't pull away. She clung harder, burying her face in Matilda's arm. Matilda worked slowly, easing the hardened mass free. It resisted, tugged back. For a moment she feared she'd hurt the child, but then, suddenly, almost silently, it gave way. A dark, solid chunk fell into her palm. Matilda stared at it in horror. It was nearly the size of a grape, rough, hardened, impossible to miss. How had no doctor ever seen this? Before she could react, she felt Rachel go still. Completely still. The child's eyes widened, not in pain, in shock. Above them, a chandelier crystal jingled softly as a faint breeze passed through the corridor. Rachel jerked upright. Her eyes darted toward the sound. She heard it. Matilda's mouth fell open. "Rachel," she breathed. The girl looked at her, trembling. Matilda leaned closer, voice barely audible. "Can you hear me?" Rachel's breath hitched. Her lips parted. She turned her head toward the whisper like someone following a string being pulled gently. And then, with a shaky, fragile voice and used for 12 years, she formed her first word. "Matilda." Matilda's heart broke and healed all in the same moment. If you were in Matilda's shoes, would you have taken that risk? Did she go too far, or did she do the right thing? Let me know in the comments. Damian burst through the front door expecting silence, maybe the soft hum of the machines Rachel relied on. Instead, he stepped into chaos. Rachel was on the floor, trembling and sobbing, her tiny hands clamped over her ears as she pointed frantically toward the corner. Her breath came in rapid, panicked gulps. And there, kneeling just feet away, was Matilda, holding the dark mass in her shaking hands. Damian froze. For a moment his brain couldn't compute what he was seeing. Then fear, the kind that comes before thought, crashed into rage. "What did you do?" he roared, his voice ricocheting off the walls. Matilda looked up at him with eyes that weren't guilty, only terrified. "Damian, wait." But he didn't hear her. He could only see Rachel crying harder, screaming now, as the pulsing dark obstruction throbbed in Matilda's grip. "You touched her. You hurt her." Damian's words were ragged. He reached for his phone, barking orders into it. Within minutes, 2 security officers rushed in and seized Matilda by the arms. "Damian, please," she begged as they dragged her toward the door. "You don't understand. Let me explain." Rachel's cries reached a pitch Damian had never heard in all her years of suffering. Her body lurched toward the door, small fingers outstretched, face contorted not in fear but devastation. "No, no, no," she wailed. The sound sliced through Damian so cleanly it left him hollow. Rachel had never screamed like that. Not for needles, not for procedures, not for seizures. This was something else. Something primal. And it terrified him. Before he could react, a knock cracked through the chaos. Damian's private investigator entered, breathless, clutching a folder thick with printed documents. "Sir, you need to see this. Now." Damian barely processed the words but followed the man into the study, his heart pounding. The investigator spread the papers across the desk, emails, internal memos, medical correspondence. "They knew," the investigator said grimly. "Specialists identified the obstruction years ago. They labeled it non-removable, on purpose. Damian blinked, confusion twisting into dread. Why would they? To push you toward high-cost experimental programs. Programs they profit from. The investigator's voice hardened. It's a coordinated scheme. A billion-dollar research pipeline built on exploiting desperate parents like you. The room spun. Damian gripped the edge of the desk as the truth carved its way through him. The tears, the sleepless nights, the prayers whispered in sterile hallways, none of it had been necessary. Rachel could have been helped. She could have been free. And Matilda. Matilda had done what the world's best specialists claimed was impossible. She saved his daughter. A violent crack erupted inside Damian, not physical, but emotional, a rupture formed by guilt and disbelief and a pain so sharp it stole his breath. "Oh God," he whispered, stumbling back. "What have I done?" He ran. Through the hallway, past stunned staff, past the machines still blinking in Rachel's room. He chased after the guards who had taken Matilda, his only thought, stop them before it's too late. He threw open the front door, heart pounding against his ribs, praying he wasn't already seconds too late. If you were Damian, discovering that doctors lied to you for profit, what would you have done? Share your reaction in the comments. Damian sprinted down the long driveway, lungs burning, vision blurring. At the gates, red and blue lights flashed across the stone walls. 2 officers were guiding Matilda into the back of a patrol car, her wrists still bound, her face streaked with tears. The sight hit him harder than any blow ever had. "Stop!" he choked out, stumbling forward. The officers paused, startled. Damian dropped to his knees on the cold pavement, hands trembling uncontrollably. "Matilda! I'm so sorry," he gasped, voice breaking. "I failed you. I failed my daughter. You saved her, and God, I didn't see it. I didn't want to see anything except my fear." Matilda's breath caught. The anger she should have had wasn't there, only exhaustion, sorrow, and something almost like relief. Damian reached for her hand, though he didn't deserve to touch her. "Please," he whispered. "Forgive me." Before she could respond, a small cry echoed from behind them. Damian turned, heart lurching. Rachel, still shaky, still overwhelmed by this new world of sound, was running toward them. Her steps were clumsy but determined, her arms stretched forward as if reaching for both of them at once. Then came a sound more powerful than the sirens, more shattering than all the pain of the past years. "Daddy!" The single word cracked the air open. Damian's breath disappeared. His vision flooded instantly, uncontrollably. He pressed a hand to his mouth as the sob tore out of him. He had dreamed of hearing it, begged God for it, imagined it in countless sleepless nights. But nothing prepared him for the real thing. Rachel collided into him, wrapping her tiny arms around his neck, clinging to him as though she finally understood what a father was, not just a presence, but a person who loved her beyond reason. Damian held her with shaking arms, burying his face in her hair, whispering, "I'm here. Daddy's here. I hear you, baby, I hear you." The officers exchanged looks, unsure whether to move, but Matilda, still in cuffs, stepped forward. Rachel turned toward her next, eyes wide, unsure but grateful in a way only a child could express. She touched Matilda's hand gently. Matilda smiled through tears. The officers didn't need more explanation. Within minutes, Matilda was released, the cuffs removed, the misunderstanding untangled. Damian repeated everything, what she had done, what she had saved, the truths uncovered by the investigator. It was enough to dissolve every accusation. In the days that followed, Damian did what he had avoided for far too long. He shined a blinding light into the darkest corner of the medical system. He released the emails, the reports, the evidence of the billion-dollar conspiracy that preyed on parents like him. Outrage swept across the world. Investigations began immediately. But Damian's focus shifted to what mattered most. Rachel was beginning a new chapter, one of sound, of learning how to decipher the overwhelming symphony of the world. She learned her first words slowly, repeating them with wonder. She discovered music, laughing each time a new note vibrated through her chest. She danced to rhythms she had never known existed. Damian rebuilt their bond piece by fragile piece, this time without fear or the suffocating silence of uncertainty. He spoke to her constantly, filling her world with words he once thought she'd never hear. And Matilda, she never left. She became part of their lives permanently, a constant presence, a guardian, a friend, and for Rachel, the woman who opened the world. Damian often found himself staring at the two of them, realizing that miracles don't always come in halos or beams of light. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a stranger brave enough to do what everyone else said was impossible. If you had the chance to speak to Damian after everything he went through, what would you say to him? Comment below and share your thoughts and experiences. Thanks for watching until the end. I put hours of work into crafting every story, writing, researching, and building every twist, just for you. If you enjoyed it, the best way to show it is by hitting like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Every click tells me my hard work mattered. It may seem small to you, but to me it means everything.